Hi, AP. Thought I'd do a little Chris Collinsworth slide in for those of you that know what that is from football. Hey, I'm doing two of these looms today. Isn't that great? We're going to do chapter 6 now. That is the Revolutionary War. Um, and as we know, unfortunately, the AP could care less about actual combat, but we'll just zip through it. Looking for time wise, if you are looking for what time period did we start taking notes, that would have been about October. See, we started October the 11th with chapter 6, section 1. That was this. Um, okay, so let's peek at it real quick on the American Revolution, on the Revolutionary War itself. Once the war got started, um, George Washington is in command. He gets thoroughly whipped in the Battle of Long Island. He retreats over into Trenton, New Jersey. That's where we have the very famous Christmas night of Washington crossing the Delaware and surprise attacking 1,000 and capturing 1,000 drunken German mercenaries, the Hessians. Um, we don't need to know that. We'll just mention the Battle of Saratoga. This is where the American general Horatio Gates manages to capture a 5,000 man British army at Saratoga. That is the turning point of the American Revolution because at that point, the French realized that the United States actually has a chance, possibly, to win this war, and this is going to lead to the alliance with France. Um, Financial problems of the war, I doubt that'll show up. Valley Forge, that's the really harsh winter that where the Baron von Steuben, yeah, he's German, um, doesn't speak a word of English either, comes over and creates Washington's honor guard, which become the elite troops that then go on and train the rest of the American army in European style warfare. And that was the end of chapter 6, section 1. Minimize that. Bring up chapter 6, section 2. The world turned upside down. From Hamilton. Remember that? You know, it's a bummer that Hamilton clips that I used to be able to show you. Yeah, Hamilton found out about them and they're down. They're gone, which is a real bummer because I'd wanted to watch that the other night. So we've got our alliance with France. That's the Treaty of Alliance of 1778, where they agreed that neither country would sign a separate peace agreement with the British. And the United States promised to accept any French conquests in the West Indies down in the Caribbean. Um, Moving on. Southern strategy of the war. This is all military. That's all military. Um, with the help of Alexander Hamilton and the French Navy, George Washington manages to surround the British Army at Yorktown on the York Peninsula in Virginia. And the British surrender. And the song that they play on the way out is a song called The World Turned Upside Down. So let's look at our Treaty of Paris that ends the American Revolution in September of 1783. All right, here's what we get. England recognizes our independence. Hey, I recognize you. You're independent. Gave up any claims on land south of the Great Lakes, gave us the rights to fish in the North Atlantic, forbade England from carrying away any slaves or other property, and guaranteed the United States freedom of navigation on the Mississippi River to the United States citizens forever, and that the area between the Appalachian Mountains and the Mississippi River belonged to pro-English Indian tribes. Um, but the English didn't push for some kind of a separate Indian territory, and so once this treaty's done, Congress and the various states are going to force the Indians to give up most of their land. Now, if you keep your eye on this about trade on the Mississippi River is going to belong to us, and that we're going to have this area south of the Great Lakes is going to be ours. That, if you remember, the British don't really carry through on that fully, which is what leads to the War of 1812, partially. So what does England get out of it? They get the right to recover post-war debts, um, and the states are supposed to give confiscated property back to the loyalists. In the end, the United States is the only country that profits from this treaty. We got our independence, and we gained the interior of North America. Spain got Florida, What does France get for all this help? They get the island of Tobago, higher taxes to help pay for American independence, the military part that they did. And then 6 years later, they get the French Revolution. But if you recall from this painting right here, the British were so miffed about losing the American colonies that the American delegates sat for a portrait at the Treaty of Paris, and the British people never showed up, so the portrait was never completed. How very British of them. So here we go. Before the American Revolution, in orange, this was Great Britain. This was Spanish. Now, this is the United States. This is British. And that is all claimed by Spain, including this little part here of what will become Mississippi and Alabama. They won't be able to hang on to that, though. And thus ends chapter 6, section 2. Let's go to 6.3. And we're cooking. We're reviewing with speed. I didn't want to do that. Bad, Mr. George. I just wanted to do that. Okay, boomer. All right, so creating the Republican institutions. The state governments had constitutions. And we had the struggle between the conservatives who wanted law and order and the liberals who wanted the protection of individual rights. But when you look at individual state constitutions, they had a list of rights that just the state couldn't take away. They had separation of powers, generally a bicameral two-house legislature, an elected governor, and a court, and separation of powers. And voting was for white male property owners. An argument being that property owners have the bigger stake in having good government than those who don't have property. Abolition of aristocratic titles. No, there's no nobility allowed here. And separation of church and state. Wars, winners, and losers. The losers, the Native Americans and the slaves, for the most part. Okay. This is a biggie. The Articles of Confederation, our first official government. So here's what we've got. The Articles of Confederation said that the national government had the authority to declare war, make treaties, settle disputes between the states, print money, and request money from the states. That word is request, because the major weakness is they do not have the power to tax the states, and it takes 9 of the 13 states to pass a law, with each state getting 1 vote. By 1780, we're bankrupt, practically. We can't pay our debts. This is a mess. This is a mess. The only thing, and this is something that I don't know could possibly be a background material that you could use on a possible DBQ. The only thing that came out of the Articles of Confederation are the land ordinances. The land ordinances, especially the big one, the 1787 Northwest Ordinance, which created, it's this area right here, modern day Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Indiana, and Illinois. They called this the Ohio Territory. It set up the rules for how a state becomes a state, that you have to have a population of 60,000, you have to write a constitution. They had set up a line and grid method of surveying the land so that it could be sold. And so what this does is it allows for the orderly settlement of the West and sets up the rules for future states to come in. The biggie for clash and conflict that goes in there is it outlaws slavery in the Ohio area, north of the Ohio River. So slavery is outlawed in this area, and that's going to set us up for our future clash as we hit the 1850s. Actually, when we hit Missouri. With the Articles of Confederation, it's death knell was Shays' Rebellion. Massachusetts, a bunch of states, the taxes had all gone up, because they needed to pay off the debt from the Revolutionary War. Massachusetts didn't provide any kind of debt relief whatsoever, and this former Revolutionary War guy, this Captain Daniel Shays, organized a rebellion where they physically stopped people from collecting taxes. They forced debtor prisons and courts to close. In response, the Massachusetts government passed the Riot Act, which outlawed illegal assemblies of any kind. Shays was marching on Springfield, Massachusetts, to collect some weapons when the governor of the state militia came out and broke up the rebellion. But the bottom line on it is that it showed that the national government had no real authority. And some people start saying we need a stronger national government. Fun fact. Here's the thing on DBQs. I could be wrong on the idea that there's going to be 5 documents spanning American history over a large theme. I still really think that's what it is. But 1985, the DBQ was just about the Articles of Confederation. From 1781 to 1789, the Articles of Confederation provided the United States with an effective government, and then it gave a list of documents to evaluate. That would be unfair, in my mind, if they were to hit us with just an Articles of Confederation question this year. That would be mighty unfair. Okay, let's go to the Constitution. Constitutional Convention. Okay, so the Articles were weak. Foreign trade was difficult. There were 13 different currencies in circulation around the United States because every state had their money. If you recall, states were putting tariffs against each other, taxes against one another. They were fighting boundary disputes. And so they finally decided something needed to be done. They came to Philadelphia, and James Madison had this Virginia plan for national authority with a three-tiered government where the people would elect a lower house of legislature. That lower house of legislature would then choose the upper house, and then both those two legislatures would then choose an executive and a judicial branch. And so the lower house is based on population. The big states, this is the big state plan. The big states are going to rule this thing, and the small states are unhappy. So that takes the New Jersey plan comes out. It says we should base our government on this. We should strengthen the Articles of Confederation, give it the power to raise taxes, control commerce, make binding requisitions, demand things from the states, and a unicameral legislature, one legislature, with each state getting one vote. We did an AP poster party on this. We did, should we strengthen the Articles of Confederation or should we scrap the Articles of Confederation? And we made a big AP poster party and we drew pictures and posted them up in the hallway outside room 100. Okay. Then somebody gets together and says, why don't we take the best of both worlds and mush them together like a Reese's peanut butter cup, right? Two great tastes, taste great together. This is the Connecticut plan or the Great Compromise, where we'll do a bicameral legislature with a lower house of representatives based on population and a Senate where every state gets 2 votes with the senators originally appointed by the state legislature. Then we'll create a one Supreme Court and an executive who will be elected by the Electoral College with the electors chosen by the states. Then there's a big argument over slavery. States like Virginia and North Carolina and South Carolina and Georgia wanted to count their slaves as population so that they could increase their number of representatives. Northern states came around and said, well, if you're going to count them for population, then we want to count them for how much taxes you have to pay, because taxation is based on population. So the compromise that comes out is the 3/5 compromise, which said that slaves would be counted as 3/5 of a person for both taxation and representation. And if you remember, the reason they landed on that fraction was that there was a widely held belief that it took 3 slaves, 3 white people could do the work of 5 slaves. And they said slaves were lazy. I think we talked about that. If you enslave me and you don't pay me, I'm working slow, you know. Anyway, they also made an agreement in that they would not mention the word slave in the Constitution. And slavery is not mentioned in the Constitution. The Constitution uses words like citizens and all other persons. To ensure that there was a national authority in this, the Constitution says the United States will pay its debts and states cannot print or mint their own money. The 2 biggest parts of the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, the Necessary and Proper Clause, or the Elastic Clause, says Congress has the authority to make new laws. And when you add in Article 6 of the Constitution, it's called the Supremacy Clause, it says that the laws and treaties of the national government, of those new laws made out of Article 1, Section 8, Clause 18, those are the supreme laws of the land. State laws do not have more power. Then we had the debate about should we ratify the Constitution. We had the Federalists who said, yes, we need this strong central government. And then we had the Anti-Federalists, do you remember them? That were afraid that they would lose state power. They were afraid they'd be ruled by elites. They were afraid the Constitution as it was written didn't have a list of rights. And they just wanted to remain kind of small, sovereign little republics, little miniature republics. Hamilton! So the Federalists responded with the Hamilton Papers, with the Federalist Papers, a series of 85 essays. Hamilton wrote the most. which explained to the general public the way that this government was going to work with a president, bicameral legislature, a judicial branch, and that each branch had the checks and balances over one another. And Federalist Paper number 10, which was written by Madison, said that this Republican form of government would be good for us because we're a large country, not in terms of population then, in terms of land space, large, that this could prevent any one group from gaining tyrannical power. Remember this cartoon? You've seen this before. The ninth pillar. I think I even put it in your note packet. The Constitution is ratified by 9 states, but it's not going to work if the 2 biggest states, Virginia and New York, don't join. And so George Washington, James Madison, they're both from Virginia. They managed to convince people like Thomas Jefferson to come on board that they're going to put a Bill of Rights into the Constitution eventually. And so when Virginia votes for ratification, as this cartoon shows, it helps to elevate New York to the ratification process as well. And then we finished with this, which won't be on the AP test at all, but the colossal party that George Washington and Benjamin Franklin threw after they had finished the final draft of the Constitution. That was an inhuman amount of alcohol that they consumed at that party. Okay, AP. So that was Chapter 6 review. How awesome is that? Chapter 7 will be about President George Washington in the 1790s. So, fun fact, been nice talking to you twice in one day. Mr. George, signing out.